Welcome to Too Many Podcasts, the podcast about podcasts. Now, podcasting from the Sherpa Chalet on Mount Podcastia, here's your host, Jim, the podcast Sherpa.
Hey everybody, welcome to Too Many Podcasts. It's me, Jim, the podcast Sherpa, and we're dispensing a little bit with the usual format. We're just jumping right into our interview. I'm going to state the obvious here. There's a bit of a virus going around the world. You may have heard of it somewhere on the media, and it is a real thing. As I was telling my guests, who we will meet very shortly, I couldn't do a podcast about coronavirus because I don't really know enough, and I know that there's a lot of misinformation out there. So I said, wait a minute, I know somebody who can help us out here, and they were our guests last season, and I had such a great time with them, and I'm glad that they've so graciously offered to come back on such short notice. Nick and Lauren, they are the hosts of Just Nah Science, and they've actually have several episodes out about coronavirus, and I encourage you to listen to them too and get your facts straight. That's the best thing that you will do while listening to their podcast. So welcome back, guys, to the Sherpa Chalet.
Well, thanks for having us.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. In the time that we last spoke, you guys got yourself a dog.
Yes.
Yeah.
Little Jerry. Yeah, he's great.
I saw him before on camera, and he's a really cute dog. So if we hear any noises before, Nick has already said, that's the dog. It's not us.
Yeah, he sleeps most of the time. Like he doesn't really do much. So he, maybe a couple of snores here or there, but he should be fine.
Okay. Well, he's a welcome guest anyway. So why don't we start with the beginning, and we'll just kind of break it down for everybody. And I know some of the information, I will be asking your opinion, so please don't be afraid to give your opinion, even if it differs from what people might be hearing, if you think things are wrong or something like that. By all means, I appreciate the knowledge that both of you guys have. You're educated in science, and you also educate people in science as well. So this is a good source. This isn't Twitter.
No Twitter science here.
Yeah, we don't want that Twitter science. Okay, so how did this first start?
All right. So we believe it first started in Wuhan, China, right? They think it originated from like a seafood market out in Wuhan. I've heard some conflicting reports. Some folks say that bats in the area originally had the virus and gave it to what you would call an intermediate animal at the market, who then allowed it to transfer and jump to humans. So whether it was an animal in the market first or bats in the area, I'm not 100% sure if we know for sure which one it was, but it originated in that area and has obviously spread out from Wuhan.
So that's actually really common for coronaviruses. This particular strain of coronavirus is new, but the class of coronaviruses is old. We've seen them before. SARS is an example of a type of coronavirus, and it's really common for them to start in an animal like bats, move to a middle animal, which will then infect a human. So that's the kind of common trajectory that these viruses follow.
But the spread was so fast. I mean, that's what I don't understand. It was like almost lightning, in no time at all. I guess they first detected it in December of 19 because I know that's what the 19 is on the coronavirus. But you're talking, 3 months and it's all around the world.
Right.
Yeah, it's super quick. And this is what we call R0, which is represented by R0. It's a number that reflects how many individuals a person who has a disease or an infection, how many people they will infect. And the R0 for this coronavirus, COVID-19, is about 2 to 2.5. So for every one person that has it, they'll infect 2 to 2.5 people. And you really see exponential growth like that. So if you take one person who, over 30 days infects 2 people at a time, and those 2 people infect 2 more people, 2 to the power of 30 is 1 million. So you get this real exponential curve and exponential growth, which is why it spreads so quickly. And
that'll kind of dispense with the rumor that this was a terrorist plot, because this is just international. This isn't something that somebody set up and to poison the whole world or anything like that.
Yeah, I've seen people go and say that there's like a bio facility in Wuhan that this virus came from. It might not have been intentional, but some people said it was a contamination breach, that it got released from this biobank that they have there. But there's been no evidence to support that. And scientists from around the world have come out and said there's no evidence to support that. So we're going to.
I think this is one of those situations that it's just prime for like conspiracy theories. And, right now people are stuck at home. They have a lot of time to think this stuff over. So we were, just talking to someone earlier about this, that they believe it was a biological attack. But you know what? This isn't the first pandemic we've ever had, and it doesn't need people to spread it like that. Like birds can, like these will spread on their own, and that's just the way they go. They don't need an intentional attack to spread, unfortunately.
Could you guys explain the difference between a pandemic and an epidemic?
Or epidemic is local. It's a lot of people with the same condition or affliction in a local area. So New York State or New York City, for example. If there's an infection or an outbreak there and it's contained within New York, that's an epidemic. But pandemic means across the globe. So it's something that affects multiple countries in high volume.
It's just basically, it feels like a bad cold to most people, right? Or even more like a flu.
Right.
Yeah, the symptoms can be very reminiscent of a flu, though people who have COVID-19, if they're a higher risk group, if they're older, immunocompromised, or some other breathing or pulmonary issue, it is very likely that it can become a little more serious. Things like shortness of breath, which you don't experience with the flu, and some more intensive care that might be required as far as breathing assistance.
They're saying the incubation period is 1 day to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But that's not for certain, though.
We don't really know. That's just our best guess. The incubation period could be 2 weeks. It could be longer. We don't really know. But our best guess at the moment is 1 day to 14 days.
And I want to ask your opinion here. What do you think went wrong? Was there anything that we could have done before this got so crazy?
Well,
I think I just flipped the switch there, didn't I?
It obviously depends on who you ask. But like I said, this isn't the first pandemic we've ever experienced. In this lifetime, sure. But in the past, we have experienced pandemics before. And the last one was in 1918. So just over 100 years ago. And so you might have heard some people reference this in the news. But the influenza 1918 or the Spanish flu is the last big pandemic that did kill off quite a few people. So they talk about two correlations between St. Louis and Philadelphia and the two different paths that those cities took and the two vastly different outcomes that they had. St. Louis, when it first started, immediately locked things down, like shut the city down, kind of like did this self-isolating social distancing thing like we're trying to do now, but they did it to, really enforced it. Philadelphia was a little bit late to the game. They kept schools open. They didn't take it as seriously. They even threw a parade. I can't remember what it was for, but they had these large social gatherings. And then within a very short amount of time, just like we're witnessing now, they were starting to experience really exponential growth. Their healthcare system was overrun. So a lot of the same issues that we're seeing today because action wasn't taken earlier.
Personally, and this is not meant to be a political statement. I do not like to get political, but during the first press conference that the president gave, he referenced a study that was done by Johns Hopkins about our preparedness for pandemics. And he talked about how we're number one as far as healthcare services, which is accurate. What he left out, and it's very important, is that we were ranked at the bottom of all countries for preparedness because of lack of government assistance to healthcare and high out-of-pocket costs. So those two things, people not being able to get appropriate healthcare because they don't have the resources like money or government assistance, makes it really hard for people to choose, well, can I take off of work to go get tested? Can I stay home for 2 weeks or a few days because I'm not feeling well? Without those assurances and protections by the government, it makes it really hard to keep people from being social, and it really
going to work. And there's still plenty of people in the U.S. who don't have health insurance, who don't have very good health insurance. So that also is a huge key factor in the fact that people aren't going to go and get tested because tests were very expensive initially. A cost of treatment was like $34,000. So someone is not going to go get tested, and they're going to try to beat it at home and maybe continue to spread it to other people because they're not being properly quarantined. So yeah, a lot of that unfortunately has a big factor in how you can contain a pandemic or epidemic either.
Do we really have like a protocol in place for the United States? Do you know if we do or not? I really wasn't sure if we did or not.
They do have protocols. The CDC has the things that or items in place that are supposed to be followed. The country, as well as states, are supposed to have stockpiles of supplies like medicine, PPE, personal protective equipment like masks, gloves, gowns. We're supposed to have a certain amount. And what we're finding out is that the amount we have stockpiled is nowhere near enough. So while we have protocols and while we have things in play, it's not enough.
Yeah, and another huge factor that goes along with that is the fact that a lot of the companies that make our PPE, that make our medications, they've all moved overseas in the last few years, a lot of them to China. So when China got shut down and when we stopped trading with China, or like closed them off to kind of seal their epidemic at the time, we closed off a lot of that stuff being able to come in, which is why we're experiencing an extreme shortage on things like personal protective equipment here in the U.S. because it's all overseas right now.
And we probably really should have reacted in December.
Yeah, at least made sure we had stockpiles set up.
There is no cure right now.
No cure. No. A lot of companies are working towards a vaccine, which will be useful for prevention in the future. And then there's also, again, this is not a political statement. It's just a fact. The president had said that the FDA approved a medication, chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine, which was not true. The FDA did not approve it for the treatment of COVID-19. They approved it for testing to see if it's beneficial and not harmful, if it doesn't have a lot of side effects. So they approved clinical trials of chloroquine and also hydroxychloroquine for the treatment, but nothing is approved at the moment.
Please don't go taking that. I know somebody did in Arizona, and he died.
Well, he took what was called chloroquine phosphate, which is a thing that you can add to fish tanks. So he must have saw chloroquine on the bottle and then was like, oh, well, the president said this is good. It's not. It is not the same formula that you would get from a pharmacy. Chloroquine is a anti-malaria drug. So very different formulations. And he wound up dying, and his wife at the moment, as of this recording, is in critical condition. So it's very important to listen to your doctors, listen to your pharmacist. Please don't self-medicate.
Yeah, I couldn't see something that you might put into your fish tank being considered useful for medicinal purposes. That's a little extreme.
Yeah, please don't.
Could you explain the airborne nature of this whole virus? This is what's got me so thrown off, because they're saying if somebody like coughs and like 2 days later you can walk into it and then you could catch it.
Right. Well, I think there's certain words that are being used like being as one and the same, like airborne and aerosol. So airborne, if a disease is airborne, then that means that it can be transmitted via what's called airborne droplets. So like from a cough or a sneeze. That's not necessarily the same thing as if a disease was transmitted via like aerosol, like in the air, like, someone was, I don't know, you can give a good explanation of that.
When something's aerosolized, it is free floating in the air and it can be taken by wind.
Right.
When something is airborne through something like droplets, like water droplets, the virus or whatever is contained within tiny water droplets, and you need to come in contact with that. It does not travel as far as something that's aerosolized. So there's a difference. To my knowledge, I haven't heard anybody say that this is aerosolized. Some people think it is, but no conclusive study has come out and said it is or is not. Best we know, it is transmitted through droplets from coughing, sneezing, which is why it's so important to make sure that you cover your mouth when you cough or sneeze.
Right. But I think a lot of people do get confused when they hear airborne. They think like, oh my God, like the wind can take it, or if someone was just over here and they had it and then you walk past that area, like I could pick it up, like it definitely gives a certain type of like, I don't know, like a false idea of how this can be spread. Again, we don't know for sure. Most of what we've heard is through droplet.
That's probably what throws me. Is like a virus lighter than air? Is that why it stays afloat? Because wouldn't like gravity make things sort of come to the ground after a while?
Yes, it would. But you have water molecules in the air at all times. So while they are subject to gravity, just walking through, even though you don't see it, as you walk just in open air, you're shifting some of those water droplets. So some of them are raising, some of them are being pushed to the side, some are coming down, and they circulate. So, and just from wind, it helps keep things circulating. So they don't necessarily just drop to the floor like dust would. They can stay in the air a little longer.
Right. But that's why they say, give that 6 foot distance for social distancing, because for someone to get this on you as of right now, sneezing, coughing can go within that like 6 foot radius. So that's why they want to keep that distance.
And I know with the cold air versus the warm air, is that really going to make a difference? Is that going to make it less spreadable, or we really don't know yet?
Yeah, I don't think we really know yet. I think it was just the CDC or someone we were hearing talking about the other day that they're hopeful maybe it will go away with the warm weather, but they really have no proof of that yet.
Yeah. There are some experts who think that this might even be seasonal. We could experience this every year. Now, as people get infected, they'll build up an immunity, but we don't know how good that immunity is, how strong it'll be, how long it'll last. So there's a lot of questions that we don't really have answers to yet. And how could we? We're in it right now.
Right. But you remember, like 20 to 30% of regular cold viruses are coronaviruses.
Yeah.
And those come around seasonally. But just like we get a new flu shot developed every year because it mutates and changes, we could get a different coronavirus each year, and some can be stronger, some can be weaker, and you have a little bit of immunity, but maybe not enough. So unfortunately, a lot of this is just like time will tell. You
actually helped me segue into my next question when you talk about the immunity issue. Is this going to be a virus where once you've had it and you get over it, that you will be immune to it, or we really don't know that either?
We don't know either. As Lauren just mentioned, 20 or so % of all common colds come from coronaviruses. And it's like the same 4 viruses that just keep coming back each year. And we can't really stop them. What we can do is similar to a flu shot. We can give an attenuated version of the virus, meaning it's either a piece of the genetic material or protein. It could be a live weakened strain, which is not very common, or it could be a dead strain. So we can give some version to help the body and boost its immunity. But again, that might be every year thing. It might be every 10 years. We don't really know until next year comes.
We're going to take a quick break, and then we will be right back with Nick and Lauren. I know this is going to seem like an eternity, guys, but we'll be right back right after these words. Whew, we made it through a commercial break. I'm with Nick and Lauren and Nick of Just Nah Science. Please listen to their podcast because, like I said, with this coronavirus going around, you need to be informed. They're doing a really great job of dispelling a lot of these silly notions and rumors that are going around on the internet, and we can't be scared by that at a time like this. So that was going to be my next question. Tell me some of the rumors and stuff that you guys have seen that you've dealt with in your episodes.
Well, a big one that I even have to dispel with my students is that everyone should just be wearing a mask right now. That's also adding to the fact that there's a huge shortage for healthcare workers. If you're healthy and you just want to be cautious, there really is no need to wear a mask. I was just telling Nick, I was in the city a few weeks ago and I'm walking down the street and I see this guy wearing a mask and I could see his entire nose and half of his mouth. It was just so poorly fitted on his face. It was not helping anybody at all. And so if you're just going to use masks and use them wrong and waste them, it's just not even worth anyone's time. So please leave the healthcare professionals the mask.
Yeah, usually the masks are for sick people to keep them from getting other people sick, or for healthcare workers who are in direct contact with people who are sick or may potentially be sick. Walking around in the general public, the grocery store, whatever, you really don't need a mask, again, unless you are sick, which again, you shouldn't be out then. Or if you have some other underlying condition, maybe you're immunocompromised or something, you want a little extra protection, I can understand that. But general healthy adult, you don't need it.
There's so many people that are wearing masks that they just have no concept of how to use them. And because there's a shortage of them at this time of this recording, it's such a waste. You see people, they wear them and then they decide that they're going to take them off and drink their coffee. And then they wear the mask and then they put it back on. And it's like, no, that's not what you're supposed to be doing.
It's like a while ago, there was this viral photo that went around the internet of like when the oxygen mask on a plane actually came down because the pressure dropped, and the person took a picture of everyone wearing the mask on the plane, and literally every single person in that picture was wearing the mask wrong because it had it over only their mouth and not also their nose. So I'm like, oh my God, nobody's even paying attention to the PSAs that they give at the beginning of the flight. It's crazy.
Speaking of flights, people are putting on their face masks, they're getting ready to take a nap or whatever. They just want to be out of there. But yes.
It's important to know how to use this stuff if you're going to use it. But
it's like anything else, right? You wouldn't use a firearm if you weren't properly trained. That's silly. So masks are really, they're a great tool, but if you don't know how to use them properly, same thing with gloves. You can wear gloves all day, but if you take them off incorrectly, they're not helpful anymore.
Right. Or if you just wear gloves all day long and you're touching everything with those gloves on and you're touching your face and you're still touching everything in your house.
Like your phone.
It doesn't matter. It's the same thing as if you were using your hands without gloves, because the whole idea is for gloves is to for a healthcare worker, like you attend to one single patient. Once you're done with them, you take them off in the correct fashion, throw them out, and you put on a new pair for the next patient.
With washing hands.
Yeah. So just wearing gloves all day long and touching everything that does nothing for you.
I guess we're on the tools part of the conversation. Tell me a little about hand sanitizer. Worth it? Not worth it? Are people going insane over it?
Yes. Right? It's useful and it's worth it. I mean, it might not be worth $20 a bottle, but it's worth having because the function of hand sanitizer, if you have the correct type of hand sanitizer, at minimum 60% alcohol is what you need in a hand sanitizer. If you have it, let's say you go to the grocery store and you handle the cart or the basket, whatever you have, and you get your groceries, and now you're getting in your car. Well, now might be a good time to apply that hand sanitizer. It's not going to keep you, 100% from getting sick. What it does is it just provides you a layer of protection until you can wash your hands. That's all it does.
Right. It's like an intermediary. Like if hand washing is not available, you want to use that till you can get to a sink and wash your hands.
But if they use it too much, though, then it's a problem, right? Because then does it dry out the skin and everything?
It can definitely dry out your skin for sure. I mean, I'd rather have dry skin than coronavirus. And then that's why you see people making their own homemade hand sanitizer. Like my mom wanted to make her own hand sanitizer. She's like, I'll just get alcohol and tea tree oil and aloe vera and I can make my own. It's like, you have no idea what ratio you need to use. So like the molarity of the alcohol might be different in shelf than you might get in a pharmaceutical grade hand sanitizer. Even if they are the same, concentration, you don't know the proper ratios. You don't know how much water to put. If you put too little, it's going to be super harsh on your hands. If you put too much, it'll be dilute. It won't be effective. So leave it to the professional chemist. And Mom, don't make your own hand sanitizer.
That's a special message to Nick's mom. We hope she's listening.
Yeah. Come on, Linda.
We're not really in complete isolation because, I mean, you guys are sitting next to each other. My wife is, she's in the other room, but she doesn't stay in the other room all the time. But, we may take a ride out, but not get out of the truck. Like if we go down by the water or something like that.
Sure.
But, there still are crowds of people and, the stores are still open. So there's still lines and there's still cashiers, and credit to those people that are working right now in a time like this. But it's still a lot of opportunity to get sick, though.
For sure. Yeah, it's actually almost too many opportunities. when they say to isolate or self quarantine, to do an activity with someone that you share a household with is totally fine, because if you are exposed, well, then people that you live with are probably exposed too. So you can do activities together. Like Lauren and I, we walk the dog together. That's fine. We live together. The idea is to do a task with the minimum number of people required for that. Unless, again, you share a household. So if you had 2 kids at home and you all wanted to spend some time together, that's fine. Again, you live in that same household. But to meet up with your 5 of your friends and go to Starbucks and then hang out in front of the building, that's not helping anybody. That's just putting more people at risk.
Right. And I was surprised that not as many athletes have it that you would expect, because there's such close contact, especially like basketball players and hockey players. They're sweating and they're very close to each other.
Yeah. I stopped going to the gym. I train martial arts, the Brazilian jiu-jitsu and all that kind of stuff. And I stopped going as soon as this came to the country. As soon as we got our first few cases, I stopped going, because you're in each other's faces. You're breathing heavy, just full on contact. It's such a huge risk. And I could not take it and potentially give it to Lauren, who could then give it to her students. Just too many ways it can go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
What about people who are asymptomatic? Because there are people, I guess, who they're just carriers and they don't show any symptoms.
Yeah.
Is that, or they will eventually?
They'll probably show some type of symptom, but it will most likely, be very mild. So they might not know they have coronavirus. They might just think that they have allergies or a runny nose or like a cough or something really mild. So, which is why it's so important to self-isolate and social distance, because again, if you have something that is very mild, well, you don't know if you have it exactly, and you could be spreading to someone who it could turn into a very severe case for them.
Right. And that's why I think that possible 2-week incubation period is so dangerous, because for 2 weeks you can be like incubating and festering this and not show for it yet. You can still be contagious, I think. So that's where one of the big differences between this and the flu, because the flu's incubation period is only between like 1 and 4 days. You're going to find out pretty quickly if you have it, and you can distance yourself. But for 2 weeks, man, I can't remember where I was 2 weeks ago, and who I was in contact with almost. So, I think we were still in school with the kids at that point. So there could have been potentially hundreds of people I could have come in contact with.
That's actually a really good point, because if you think about, you mentioned before the number of potential people who you will infect if you have it. For the flu is about just over 1. So with an incubation of 4 days, the maximum number of people you're going to infect is like 5, roughly. With COVID-19, an R0 of 2 to 2.5 and an incubation time of 14 days, you could be infecting 28 to 35 people or so. I mean,
before you even know you have it?
Yeah, before you even know you have it. So it's crazy. You can infect tremendous numbers of people.
And that probably had to be a large part of the problem with this one going around, I would imagine. Yes. Just people that, they weren't sick and they just lived their lives and poof. It's amazing how, you never think about how many people you actually get into physical contact with each day, right. Even depending on what you do.
Yeah, it's not until it's taken away from you, like now, where you realize, damn, I interact with a lot of people. Not us, but, other people.
Sure. All right. Did you guys want to talk about any other misconceptions that you've been seeing that you wanted to disprove?
Oh.
We kind of mentioned it before, like the warm weather is just gonna wipe it on out. And like we mentioned, we don't really know for sure. But I did run into a guy in the park while walking our dog. Our dogs are very fond of each other, so we always stop and chit chat for a little bit. And he was just telling me that. He told me this like a week and a half ago. He's like, oh, yeah, Mayor de Blasio said that 5 more days of warm weather like this, and it's gone. He's like, so it's already done. We don't even have to worry about it. And, man, I wish I saw him again, because I'm like, 5 days, a week and a half ago, you told me this was going to be over. What happened?
He might need to fix his calendar, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it's not as funny, unfortunately. But it's the idea that young people can't get sick from this. And I see this way too often. Those kids on spring break in Miami. I mean, come on, how dense do you have to be?
Yeah, it's putting it nice.
And yes, I'm being nice. Our show is explicit, so I just let it out. But
he's gotten good at restraining himself since the last visit, I noticed.
But, the idea is to social distance, even if it's not for you, despite the fact that 40% of hospitalized patients in the U.S. were under the age 55, disregarding that, just the idea that your neighbor, your aunt, your uncle, your grandparents, your own parents, if you spread it to them, it can be very serious for them, even if it's not for you, which, again, it can be very serious in younger people. So I don't want the idea that it's like the flu and only older people are at risk. Not true at all. It happens to be a higher mortality rate in older people, but severity it's severe in all age groups except for children for some reason.
Yeah, we're dying to find out why that is.
Yeah, children are not affected by this as traditional high risk groups is what I wanted to say.
Right.
Do you think maybe little kids have something in their resistance that they lose as they get older?
The children do have, and this probably has nothing to do with it. I am just making shit up as I go. But children have in their upper chest an extra lymphatic organ that we lose as we become adults. So maybe they have a higher amount of ability to filter. That's what the point of the lymphatic system is. It's like a filter for your blood, similar to how your kidneys filter. So maybe there's something to do with that. I have no idea. Like I said, I'm making stuff up. But that's the only thing I can think of that children have that adults don't.
And do you think that maybe with some of the flu medications that they've had, that they'll maybe develop an offshoot? The people that are hospitalized, what is exactly happening to them? Are they just being put on respirators if they can't breathe and that's it? Or are they getting any sort of medication, or there's really not much they can do?
So at the moment, they're getting critical care support as the best they can. And recently the FDA, as I mentioned before, approved the use of hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin, or also known as Zithromax, in combination for what's called compassionate use, which means you're in serious condition and we don't really have any other options. So the FDA will allow medications to treat this, even though it's not approved. So that's what we call expanded use or compassionate use. We're allowed to do that, and it's also happening in clinical trials. That's all we got at the moment.
What do you think we can do, and this is an opinion question, for the next time or to prevent something like this from happening? We're kind of reacting right now. We weren't really proactive. We were more reactive. But what do you think we could do the next time to be more proactive?
Well, there's a great video going around the internet of Bill Gates speaking in 2015 about how he's saying it's not going to be war. It's not going to be this. It's going to be something we cannot see, aka a virus or a germ that's going to take us down. He's like, and we are not prepared. Like, he was preaching this like 5 years ago, and he was saying, he's like, instead of running like simulated war games, he's like, we need to run simulated germ games so we can try out like what we would do in the event of an epidemic in the US or a pandemic. And man, I really wish he was, they heeded his advice, because I think we would have been a little bit more prepared if we were running these, so to speak, like simulations. But we need more stockpiles, that's for sure. We need more companies to move back to the US and manufacture here. So in terms of incentives to get them back here, we really need to take that seriously. And we need to do something with the healthcare system for sure, because we can't have people choosing between like going to work and getting the healthcare that they need. Obviously, we're seeing the extreme repercussions of that right now.
Yeah, you don't leave anything for me?
Sorry.
Think on the good stuff.
We can give you a sec, Nick, if you need to think it over.
No, I really do want to emphasize Lauren's point of having appropriate stockpiles of medications, personal protective equipment, and also there really does need to be a better education to the public about public health, about epidemiology, and the importance of washing hands, sanitation. I mean, those things are critical. We didn't even touch proper hand washing techniques. but it's super, super important. And now if you go on Twitter, you can easily find videos demonstrating proper hand washing technique. But what you don't see in those videos is that you need to dry your hands completely. It's actually super important to not leave them wet, and when possible, to not use the automatic hand dryers. Use paper towels. Those hand dryers are incredibly unsanitary.
I was just thinking about that when you brought that up, when you talked about hand washing. What about the type of soap that we should be using for washing our hands? Antibacterial? No, just regular, like, or whatever.
Won't help because the coronavirus is a virus. Antibacterial, anything, it doesn't affect viruses, which is super strange because they're using hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin in combination to treat a virus, and azithromycin is a type of antibiotic. I have a few ideas on why I think it works. I don't want to get into it too much because I don't want to bore everyone.
But that's another major misconception is that, why don't we just use antibiotics? Well, antibiotics don't work on viral infections.
Except for apparently Zithromax when in combination with.
Yeah, except for some reason they're using it right now in combination with other drugs, like he's saying. But so I'm really curious to know why. But just the general misconception. A lot of people are like, I have the flu or I have a cold. I want a Z-Pack. Like, that's not going to do anything for you, unfortunately.
You know what? I'll get a little picky here with the washing again. Very hot water, lukewarm.
Warm water is fine. You don't have to burn your skin off. Viral DNA and protein are pretty resilient, about as strong as ours. So in order to denature or mess up the proteins in bacteria, you only need a small temperature or pH change. But to mess with the bacteria, the viral proteins in DNA, you need a much higher temperature, about the same temperature it would be to cook us. So using hot water that's hurt your hands doesn't really help too much. Nice, warm, comfortable temperature.
Yeah, it's really just more about the soap and like the friction of washing your hands.
My wife is big with hand washing. She's always been big with hand washing. We can say that, but I mean, now I think it's more so like, wash your hands. You sneeze, wash your hands. You blow your nose, wash your hands. You take out the garbage, wash your hands.
Yeah, and which is good. That's how it should be. I mean, she's doing it the right way. The rest of us, that's why we're in this problem. And Warren pointed out, everybody is buying all these Clorox wipes and bleach and whatever. But if you go down the aisle with the hand soap, it's all stocked. So people aren't getting this.
All the toilet paper's gone, but all the soap is still fully stocked for some reason.
Yeah.
We have this completely backwards, guys.
Yeah, the toilet paper thing doesn't make sense to me.
And also, to use the toilet paper, you should be using soap afterwards anyway. So
yeah, I mean, we can keep going with this. Clear. I think that's the message.
Yeah. I don't get the toilet paper thing either.
Yeah, diarrhea is a very uncommon, I shouldn't say very uncommon, but it's an uncommon symptom for COVID-19. So for people to be buying the amounts of toilet paper that they are, someone on Instagram or TikTok or something did the math. And if you buy a certain number, you're going to be getting like 160 times a day to use the toilet paper in like a 2 or 3 week period. It's something astronomical. I mean, it's absurd.
There's a website out that actually says, this is how much toilet paper you have. This is how long it's going to last you.
Oh, that's so cool.
I got to find that link. I got to send it to you guys. You'll get a kick out of it.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But it's nice to know people have this kind of time on their hands that they can figure this out.
Yeah, somebody dedicated their day to creating a website. They had to buy a domain. They had to do all this. Like, somebody put money into this.
That's right. Okay, so just to sum up, the course that we're on, it's good, but it's not perfect. Wash your hands, social distance. You're sick, obviously stay away from people.
Yeah, and if you're concerned that you have symptoms of COVID-19, or you've come in contact with someone who does have it, make sure you reach out to your local hospital, or they have numbers to call where you can get information about being tested. A quick Google search will get you that information. It might change depending on where you live. So I don't want to give any specific numbers, but you can reach out to your local hospital. They know what the protocol is.
To wrap it up, for sources of information, we know Just Not Science. There's number one on the list to get the facts. Where else should people be looking?
World Health Organization, CDC, those are the two best places.
Stay off of Twitter.
I mean, yes. Don't go to that one dude who, you see posting on Facebook random. if you're going to go on social media to get information, go to reputable news sources, go to the CDC directly. I mean, the World Health Organization posts constantly about updates for COVID-19. So be, free to use social media. Just go to the right places. Don't go to,
Not the guy you went to high school with who sees through it all.
So I went to high school with you guys then. Then we're okay.
We're good. They can live, yeah.
Listen, I'm a scientist. I'm reputable. I'm published.
Why don't you guys give us a little shameless self-promotion? We know that you've done this before for us, just so if people want to follow you guys.
Sure. We have our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram all at Just NAS Science. That's Just NA Science. Our website is justnasscience.com. And you can find us on any podcast platform. But we recently started doing live streams on Castbox. So if you follow us on Castbox, you can get notified anytime we go live and you can interact with us. And we love hearing people's questions and comments. And we have a ton of fun doing them. So we really want to keep doing them.
Yeah.
So.
We're here to debunk all your science myths and to give you updates on COVID-19.
Nick and Lauren, Just Not Science. Guys, thank you so much. They're like, they should have like superhero capes on them for coming to the rescue again.
I told you I should have worn mine.
I thought you might have had one.
I do.
No, thank you so much for having us again. I really enjoy our interviews.
Thank you.
A very special thanks to my friends Nick and Lauren of Just Nah Science and providing us with very valuable information. And also, if you check the Sherpa sheet, the show notes that are with your podcast app, you will see links to the other episodes of Just Nah Science that they put out regarding the coronavirus. So at this time, information is key, so keep yourself informed. This episode was brought to you by Audible, and you can get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/Sherpa. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Audiobooks are probably a great thing to be doing right now while many of us are in quarantine or isolation or whatever you want to call it. But you could also check out my show. There are plenty of episodes and you can get them on the podcast app that you're probably listening to right now. Or if you're not listening to this on a podcast app, go to my website, Sherpalution.com, and all the episodes are there. You've got 2 seasons worth. There's about 50 or so. So that'll definitely keep you busy for a little while. Don't forget, you can follow me on social media. There's another thing to do. Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Sherpalution.com. Thank you so much for coming down and listening to this show. Please share it with your friends on social media and inform them. And like I said, also encourage them to check out Just Nah Science. You'll really enjoy it. And until next time, let's hear from a guy who is probably invincible to most diseases, the amazing, the invincible Mr. Bruce. Please show everyone the door and make sure you wipe the handle too. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Too Many Podcasts. Please disperse. You can go home now. I said you can go home now. Viva la Sherpalution. Viva la Sherpalution. Oh. Yeah, I'll come back now, you hear?